welcome to the India Development Debate. I'm Taneia Bhardwaj and we're coming to you live from our Mumbai studios. The Rafale deal negotiated by the Modi government is certainly cheaper but could have been better. That's the sum and substance really of the Comptroller and Auditor General's report that was tabled in Parliament today. The much-awaited report has made it very clear that the deal inked by the Modi government was cheaper by 2.86%, not the 9% that the government had claimed earlier. The main savings were made under the India Specific Enhancements section. While it may provide the government the much-needed shot in the arm, what was concerning was the central auditor's red flag as far as the lack of financial and performance guarantees that could prove to be a ticking time bomb in case of any eventuality go. The big beneficiary was Dassault. As CAG says, it would save the money from the removal of banking and performance guarantees. The report is, however, armed both sides with enough ammunition to carry on the political slugfest. Despite the Congress dubbing the report a Chaukidar Auditor General report, ironically, it did use bits and parts of it to demolish the government's contention that it negotiated a better deal, while the BJP is protecting the report as a vindication of its stance. The CAG report and how it impacts India's politics in the run-up to the big election is our focus this evening on the India Development Debate. And let me then cross over to the panel for the evening. And let's welcome Hitesh Jain. He's a spokesperson for the BJP from the Congress Party. We've got Aishwarya Mahadev, who joins in from New Delhi. Maruf Raza, who's a strategic affairs consultant and expert, is here with us. So is Abhijit Iyer Mitra, senior fellow at the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies and consulting editor of Times of India. Sagarika Ghosh joins in as well. Good evening to each one of you, and thank you so much for taking the time out. Hitesh Jain, let me begin by asking you, the CAG says that the NDA's deal is 2.86% cheaper than the UPA's. While it does counter the opposition's charge of a costlier deal, the fact is that you had Union Minister Arun Jaitley on the floor of the House say that the deal was 9% cheaper. Nonetheless, would you consider this report as a vindication of the government's stand?
CAG report clearly establishes 4 facts. 1. The price is definitely lower. Second, the escalation cost is also on the lower side. Third, the delivery is on the faster side. And fourth, better maintenance. Now, if you look at all these facts and look at the lies that were muddled and the falsehood that were manufactured, what does this shows? And more importantly, CAG report also demonstrated one important fact as to how from 2004 to 2014, there was no deal and no seriousness was shown to conclude any deal. So when all the when the lies were muddled on all the 4 facts, fine, we may differ on a certain percentage, but at the end of the day, even if you take the CAG report on the face value, it is 2.86% lower, which means that there is a savings of approximately 27 to 28,000 crore as against the falsehood manufactured by the Congress party that there is a loss of 30,000 crore and a support of 30,000 crore to Anil Ambani. Has anyone till date, except using the numbers, explained how Anil Ambani got 30,000 crore rupees in this deal? So all the answers are there in CAG. In fact, the CAG report, after all this, you cannot have a situation when Supreme Court is right, CAG is right, French government is right, IAF is right. All the institutions are saying, supporting the assertion made by the government. And the only person who is manufacturing the lies is the Crown Prince.
Aishwarya Mahadev, I'm sure you'll want to respond to that. But, before we get to the specifics and talk about the questions that were raised, some hours ago by your party president, I just wanted to get, one thing out of the way. On one hand, you've dubbed the Central Auditor's report as Chaukidar Auditor General report. On the other, you're using this very report to demolish the BJP's argument that they negotiated a better deal. Isn't that doublespeak?
I don't think it's doublespeak, because I believe the CAG, as much as he wanted to hide what he should have and also have played the role of Chowkidar Auditor General, I think certain things were so powerful that you had to acknowledge it in any form and way, and that is what the CAG has done. But a couple of responses, right? And you know, the sad thing is, he says no, Anil Ambani's corruption, nothing. No, sir, the CAG report looks only at the deal, not of the offset. And the second thing is, you say where 30,000 crore came from. There's a categoric response that Mr. Anil Ambani himself on his website has a press release saying he's getting 30,000 crores and 1 lakh crore worth of life cycle a contract later. The very simple fact that exists here is that I don't know how he came up with 27,000 crores, but what they're saying and arguing is the deal being cheaper is one thing you need to realize. They've excluded the idea of how much a bank guarantee would have costed, and also the India specifications, which has been noted in the dissent, right? However, the problems that arise out of this is very simply, the CAG also acknowledges why 36, not 126. Why would you compromise a sovereign guarantee or a bank guarantee? Why would you not have an escrow? All of which benefited Dassault, and it clearly states that. And last, the delivery is far slower, and this is an apprehension reported as well. All we're asking of the BJP, we believe if you're a responsible government and if you have so many accusations against you and you put Narendra Modi on this plank of being uncorruptible and nobody can get to him and he's purer than Ganga, then why at no point did you even ask or allow us to have a JPC? We said it's a bipartisan parliamentary procedure. We can have it. The Supreme Court itself conceded it didn't have jurisdiction. The CAG looks at just the financial aspect. The JPC was what we would have had a wholesome sort of discussion and also a probe on. And finally, if we were wrong, you would have stood vindicated. But sir, now you've demitted, or rather you'll demit office soon, and today is the last day of session, with the shadow of doubt over you that you never allowed this to happen. And that is the simple question. Why wouldn't you allow it? And the Congress is going to keep asking it because we believe you have something to hide.
In the course of this debate, pricing, delivery, guarantee, it's something that we're going to, of course, put forth to both the BJP as well as the Congress. But I want to first just get opening thoughts from everybody. Maruf, from what you've read, at least parts of the CAG report, are we right in saying that there is something in it for both sides?
Well, you know, it depends what you want to read in these reports. I mean, it's an old saying that history has always been used selectively and information is also used selectively to project a point of view. You know, the basic thing to understand is that firstly, you've got yourself a first-rate aircraft. The Air Force is very happy with it. Secondly, you could only at this point of time, and this is something which rarely comes up, that as a nation have afforded this kind of money for 36 aircrafts, because the Air Force has been on record and off the record also, two air chiefs have told me that they needed immediately at least 2 squadrons, which is 18 and 36 aircrafts, to stop the tilt of the balance of the Air Force's capabilities vis-a-vis our neighbors. Now, there are 2 or 3 issues that have been brought out and countered. Please understand that, you know, any defense deal which takes place between country to country, and most recently there was one with the Russians of the S-400 missiles. We didn't ask for a bank guarantee. We don't need any kind of escrow account. It has been always the case with the UPA's deals with the Americans, where Americans have over a period of time become our largest arms supplier of late, with over $15.4 billion worth of weapon systems. Countries at that level, heads of state, consider it an insult if you ask them to try and give you that kind of an assurance, as though we in India are holier than thou when it comes to integrity. The second thing is that whenever you insist on this, the French have actually gone the extra step by giving a letter of comfort, which is also not given in earlier cases, whether you did it with the Russians or the Americans, which are the large part of the government of government deals. So I cannot understand why the insistence on this. There was been a news item doing the rounds about a Deputy Secretary Air 2 who had raised these observations. He's too junior an officer to try and question the PMO. It's obviously some kind of fabricated information. Now, finally,
yes,
the most important thing to understand is, what can India afford? Do you know that only 24% of the national defense budget can go for capital outlay, which is less than which is about 100,000 crores.
Okay.
Now, we paid 25% for the Rafales up front.
Sure.
We're going to pay the rest when they begin to get delivered. So we don't have the money to go in for that. And let me tell you, finally,
Yeah.
whether you buy 36 or 126, the 126 option for the Air Force is alive. It is not connected to these 36.
Okay,
This
Maruf.
was a
All right.
stopgap measure to give the Air Force the necessary punch.
Yeah.
Please understand that.
Okay, Maruf. Aishwarya, I see your hand up, but I just want to, make sure everybody gets a chance to speak, and then I'll come back to you, to be able to respond. Abhijit Iyer Mitra, who benefits from the CAG report? Both sides, as you heard, saying that their stance is vindicated.
I'd say on balance, it probably seems to give BJP the advantage, and I'll tell you why. Because there is a lot of recording of process violation that happens at least till 2012-2013 under the UPA government. We now know with the benefit of hindsight that that process violation wasn't exactly crooked. It was just adjusting to necessity, because at that point of time the Air Force had wanted a light fighter replacement, and it realized what it actually needed was a heavy fighter replacement to drop for certain long-range nuclear missions, and that is why it had to modify it into a medium fighter contest. Obviously it's very easy to say that was also a scam, and I did at one point of time, but with the benefit of hindsight now we know it wasn't. But what it does prove quite categorically is that the BJP did make price savings. So if we are, there seems to be 2 points of attack on the BJP here. One is that it's a scam. The second is that there was no price savings. This certainly proves that there was no price savings, and as for it being a scam, I'm yet to see any kind of evidence. Even circumstantial evidence simply doesn't exist on that score. That said, it's also very important to understand where the price savings came from. Of course, the reduction of number would, if you look at natural economics, lead to an escalation of price. That in spite of that the per unit price managed to remain the exact same. So if you look at the numbers of the report, it remains the exact same, no variation, is quite remarkable. The second thing was that there was considerable savings on the India Specific Enhancements and the weapons packages, and this was offset by a higher outlay for maintenance and spares, which is again very important. And the third very important category where the cost overshot the initial estimate was in the training package, because prior to this we used to train with the manufacturer, not with the Air Force, and here what happens is the Indian Air Force trains directly with the French Air Force on operational grounds. So these are all very significant additions, and that they added to the cost is not surprising, but overall there was very clearly a price savings. I don't think we can deny that or counter that at all, and that's about the sum total of it.
Sagarika, has the CAG report, sure, it's given ammunition to both sides, enough ammo to ensure that the politics around this, fighter jet deal doesn't die down anytime soon?
Taneia, the politics is only just beginning. This is now full-scale forward into election mode. We are now looking at the politics of perception. We're now looking at different narratives of corruption being traded and counter-traded. The Congress is going to go hell for leather on the various allegations it's making on the Rafale deal. Already we've seen Rahul Gandhi in no mood to back down. He's come out all guns blazing at a press conference saying that about the letter of comfort versus the sovereign guarantee. The fact that pricing has not been revealed, the fact that this is a Chaukidar auditor report. So the Congress is not going to back down. It has its narrative of corruption or scam. The BJP has its narrative of corruption. It's going to up the ante on Augusta Westland, on Mamata Banerjee's chit fund, on the questioning of Karthi Chidambaram, the son of former Finance Minister P. Chidambaram. So I think we're going to see these two alternative narratives of corruption play out very strongly. The CAG report, I think, as you rightly point out, offers scope to both sides to ratchet up the rhetoric and to ratchet up the campaign. But Taneia, I do want to say here that I think institutionally, every time the Rafale deal has come before an institutional process, I think it has been advantage BJP and has been advantage government. The Supreme Court did not find anything anything wrong with the pricing and the procedure when Arun Shuri and others went to the Supreme Court. Now the CAG has not exactly found anything terribly wrong with the deal. In fact, it's pointed to a low price. So I think institutionally, every time the deal has come up before institutions, it has been advantage government. So it really has to be seen how far the Congress now wants to keep banging away at Rafale. Every time there's a Rafale development, Mr. Rahul Gandhi comes out and does a press conference. Now, what about the other issues? What about the NSSO report? What about the jobs? What about the real issues of farmers' distress? You know, it is interesting, Taneia, that none of the other opposition parties, whether it's the Trinamool or the TDP or the Aam Aadmi Party, which held its rally today, they are not actually focusing on Rafale at all. And I must confess, when I traveled in Madhya Pradesh on election coverage, I didn't find any resonance for Rafale or what it exactly was or the exact details of the deal. So is Rahul Gandhi exhausting too much of his political capital on banging away at the Rafale deal when institutionally it's advantage government and he seems to be, the Congress seems to be pretty much isolated as far as the other opposition parties are concerned on this single focus on the Rafale deal and attempts to corner the government?
Okay, Hitesh Jain, let's talk about then, you know, some of the points that the Congress party made today, Rahul Gandhi in his press conference. Now, he says that, of course, there was a saving of 2.86% and that's because the NDA decided to do away with the bank guarantee, which would have constituted an additional 7% cost. How do you respond to that?
Well, frankly speaking, now what they are trying to do is they are trying to catch some threats. Congress has been exposed very badly. Earlier, yesterday, I mean in 2018, he himself was telling that CAG should give the report. Where is the CAG? Where is the CAG report not coming? Now, on the eve of the report, he called all sorts of names to CAG, calling him Chaukidar Auditor, whatever names he wanted to call, he calls it. He says, I do not accept the report, but I will accept partly. So this clearly shows the doublespeak of Congress, whether it is CAG report, whether it is Supreme Court or whether it is EVM. If we win the elections, there is no problem in the EVM. If we lose the election, then you have doctored the EVM. So what is this demonstrating? This is clearly demonstrating for the last 3 years, anything that you do not support, you have to manufacture falsehood. The fact is you are trying to catch on some thread. And I want to be very categorical, and I'm sure most of my panels except Congress panelists will agree to the fact that personally when you go on the ground, look at the pulse of the government and you ask a simple question that what is the integrity of the Prime Minister? Do you think his integrity is compromised? The answer is clearly no. We believe in the Prime Minister. He is honest, and it is up to the Congress, because if they continue to make such kind of allegations and if they are continue to do the name calling, they will make a fool of themselves and they will hand over this as advantages to us. We'll be very happy if they want to contest the election on the plank of Rafale, and we will show them what the result is and how people are going to vote. So, I mean, we cannot stop Congress from raising the issues, but the fact is institution after institution, if they support, then clearly they have to introspect, and the party also has to think how many lies they will peddle to save the dynasty.
Aishwarya, let me ask you, you know, in your in the press conference that was held earlier today, and you know, I was also sort of going through the Twitter page, one of the charges that you're making, and I'm just going to quote, is that the reason the numbers have been not declared is that dollar for dollar the deal costs more than before. Can you help our viewers understand exactly what the case is here, you know, that the Congress is making? Because, you know, one also needs to take into account the fact that dollar prices could have had a lot to do with it, given the rupee has, you know, depreciated substantially since 2007.
The Congress's case on cost and pricing is very simple. We believe that there is a lot of confusion, besides the fact that it was scrapped from 126 to 36, that we believe that there's a lot of discrepancy in how much you are paying. There's also a lot of confusion as to, you know, the bank guarantee, the amount that you would have added to the total cost and how it's not there. And let me just clarify for everybody, a bank guarantee or a sovereign guarantee is something that obviously the sovereign guarantee especially is not something we've given other governments, but here it was required because the IGA made India a party with Dassault. There was a private entity, which is why the Indian negotiating team also spoke about the fact that a letter of comfort is not enough, because that is not something that is enforceable in a court of law. And France can exhaust all its local remedies for Dassault and then come to a neutral forum of arbitration, which could take several years, which the CAG report also speaks about. The simple fact and the problem that the Indian National Congress has is the sort of secrecy, how this is mired in so much secrecy, and nobody decides, irrespective of the fact that it's a defense deal with national security implications. There is a sort of secrecy that needs to be answered. Whether it's about HAL, whether it's about Anil Ambani, who we haven't even gone into the offset portion of this and the CAG doesn't address it, or whether how is it that design and development saw such a massive increase from the UPA deal to what the NDA deal is. And the fact also remains that you have several officers who were on this, who may have finally said, no, we're fine with everything, who did dissent, who did speak about the fact that there are parallel negotiations, that there is no escrow, that you also see instances of the fact that arbitration clauses have gotten weaker, and so many other problems. We're saying when there is so much that is being questioned of the NDA, the least they can do is give us a satisfactory answer through a JPC where the NDA itself is party to it, and not hide behind the Supreme Court or any other institution. And on the ground, let me tell you, Rafale is a plank not about voting dividends right now, but rather about the fact that the NDA is corrupt. We understand that the problem on the ground is also, along with Rafale, a lot of other things. There is job, there is agrarian distress, there is fact that women and child empowerment has seen its lowest. All of those are still priorities. But none of that changes. However, we still will highlight, irrespective of what people think of how this is going to affect us in the elections or not, the Congress President and the Indian National Congress stands firmly behind the fact that we will prove corruption in this case, and it does not matter what its implications are, because we believe on principle that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has cheated the people of this country.
Maruf, help us understand this better, and I just want to take off from what Aishwarya was saying. The CAG has said that the money saved by removal of banking and performance guarantees has not been factored in, and that the benefits of these could be accrued by Dassault Aviation. Now, is the CAG somewhere suggesting that the price finally agreed to by the Indian side could have been even lower as the banking charges had been waived off?
Well, there are several things, and I think Aishwarya has projected her point of view. But please understand that, sure, as far as the Congress party is concerned, they want us to go through the same steps of the Bofors saga. And it was the Bofors saga which led to India virtually not buying any equipment worth the name. And the armed forces have reached a stage, talk to any service chief, he'll tell you, where critical requirements are not being met, forget about long-term projection. But let me explain to you. Firstly, the Rafale negotiations and the shortlisting took place between 2001 and 2014. Between 2007 and 2014 was the time when the prices were being negotiated. One of the top-class Air Force officers who was part of the cost negotiation committee, as per the defense acquisition process, was Air Marshal Sinha. And his reputation is apparently that you couldn't find a better man. Now, the fact of the matter is, and it's a simple question, would your flat or your house cost the same today as it was costing in 2001 or 2007 in any of the cities in India? Obviously, inflation comes into play when you delay purchases over such a period of time. The second thing is that when they say letter of guarantee, escrow account, etc., please read the defense procurement process 2013. That was then applicable when the deal was struck by the Prime Minister and subsequently approved by the Cabinet Committee on Security in 2015-16, because the new DPP only came into play after that. Para 60 and Para 71 very clearly states that when you do country-to-country deals, you do not have to get a bank guarantee or an escrow account or anything. More importantly, if a country is seen to be an important strategic partner, and India is infamous for its ad hoc military arsenal because we buy weapons from here, there and everywhere to please every one of the P5 countries, which are the world's biggest arms exporters, except China. We don't buy from China. So the fact of the matter is, this was a strategic decision taken in the interest of Indo-France relations. Now the question is, why was French government involved with the Rafale. When you do a deal with Washington, Washington doesn't manufacture aircrafts or helicopters. You eventually get directed to Boeing or one of the other companies that make the weapon system that Washington gives you a letter of comfort or verbal comfort from the President of the United States, which is what the FMS is all about. So the fact of the matter is, we are going in circles asking questions which would be applicable to a vendor like Augusta Westland, which is a private company which goes through the selection process of the defense procurement process, where you are doubtful if something unhappy happens, then you can cash your guarantee, which we did in the Augusta Westland case. Here there is a country involved, in a country which is a major country of repute in the world. You cannot be playing the same rules with them. Even the DPP doesn't enforce that on you. So I can't understand. And the point about HAL, you have just seen an upgraded HAL Mirage has gone and crashed and killed the 2 pilots before takeoff. And this is not the first crash that's taken place. You know, India has probably the worst air crash record in the world. Between 2001 and 2011 and 2018, we've had more than 70 crashes, with equal number or more pilots having died. Most of them are assembled, manufactured, etc. by HAL. So why are we pushing the HAL card? It is for that reason that this country today also can't manufacture an aircraft worth the name. And Brazil, which is also an aspirant for the Security Council seat, makes first-class aircrafts. Israel has reached world-class status in defense manufacture. And we are still trying to get our act together whether we will be able to have a Tejas in place of the depleting mixed squadrons or not. So let's not labor on issues which anybody with some understanding on national security will tell you that you're talking through your hat. Okay. And finally, the decision to keep going on, and Rahul Gandhi and the Congress leadership, I'm told, has given a command to everybody of consequence that don't get off the Rafale bandwagon, because that's the thing which are going to bring these guys down, because they had a similar experience in Rajiv Gandhi's time. Let's grow up. Let's look at what is national interest. And everyone has agreed that this was the first-rate aircraft. It was shortlisted by the Air Force, and it is meeting. And let me tell you about the, the logistics and maintenance costs.
Maruf, I'm just going to. Maruf, we'll just come back and make that point. I just want to take it across to Abhijit, and we've got a lot of ground to cover. Abhijit, the CAG report says that the vendor response to solicitation of offers was low, which then restricted competition. The CAG has also said that the government could have used comparative pricing from the unsolicited offer by Eurofighter to determine a better price. Do you think that Dassault did underreport the costs and Eurofighter could have, should have been given a chance?
So did Dassault underreport the cost? Yes, I believe they did. And they did lowball the offer, which is why you see that through the entire process of selection in late 2011, 2012, right up to about 2013, 2014, you see that the publicly available figures for this contract for 126, they go up astronomically to about 300%, because they went on adding costs that they'd lowballed during the initial RFP. And this is why in the CAG report, when you look at the benchmarking, initially the benchmarking is dismissed as unrealistically low because it was based on the Qatar on the Egyptian Rafale purchase benchmark, which then had to be revised in lieu of all the additional equipment that we wanted and so on and so forth. Why is there, in this particular case, there's been no low vendor response? So we got everybody worth their salt except the Chinese who manufacture aircraft to actually show up for this particular contest. This wasn't one of those cases. It is a general case, however, that the CAG is absolutely accurate on, that because we tend to cut and paste requirements, we end up getting, it's like putting out an RFP. Say you're in the market for a luxury car and you decide that you want the length of a BMW 7 Series, you want the heads-up display of a Mercedes-Benz, you want the sunroof of a Rolls-Royce, and you want the marquee of a Rolls-Royce. You don't get cars like that in the market, and similarly you don't get fighters like that in the market. So this has been an issue in the past. In this particular case, that wasn't the issue. The problem here, of course, is that with the CAG's report, what keeps coming out very clearly is that the the discovery of pricing is a severe problem that we lack human resources on. We need to be much more clear about pricing. We need to be costing that part of the, writing that part of the DPP much clearer. Unfortunately, even the latest DPP doesn't give much comfort on this score because it's fundamentally unrealistic. And the problem here arises from the fact that you're looking at adding certain capabilities instead of looking at an effects-based solution, and that's always going to be a very big problem with all of this.
Sagarika, before we take a break, my question to you now, despite both the Supreme Court or the CAG not finding any, ghotala, so to speak, as you said, it's institutional advantage for the government, do you think the Congress is going to be able to convince voters, maybe urban voters, that the Rafale deal indeed is murky and, reeks of sort of crony capitalism?
Well, I think there are questions about the Rafale deal. Very reputed newspapers, the Indian Express, the Hindu, have been coming out with detailed investigative reports on how the procedures were bypassed, on, the kind of meeting that Mr. Anil Ambani had 2 weeks before the deal was signed in Paris. So I think there are questions, and I think that the citizen of India and the taxpayer of India deserves a full statement from the highest levels of the government, perhaps even from the Prime Minister, on exactly what it was that he was trying to do. Why is it that the decision was taken that, that we would only get 36 aircraft and not the full amount? What were the motivations of the government? I think questions are there. Now, is it a scam? Is it a massive corrupt practice? That is still, I'm afraid, not clear. And as I've said, institution after institution has held that there really wasn't that much wrong with the deal. But, politically, I think the Congress is determined to ratchet up the pressure on Rafale, when on the ground, as I've said, there is no real resonance. Now, it has to be said, Taneia, that, as far as the Congress party is concerned, it seems to be now moving further and further into its own narrative, into its own rhetoric, and away from the so-called Gathbandhan. Yesterday, Akhilesh Yadav was stopped from boarding a plane, at Lucknow airport. We didn't see the Congress say anything on Akhilesh Yadav or express any support for him. We're now learning that in Bengal, the Congress is going to tie up with the left against Mamata Banerjee. Today in Parliament, we saw the Congress attacking Mamata Banerjee on the chit fund scam. So, where is the Gathbandhan as far as the Congress is concerned? Is the Congress distancing itself from the Gathbandhan? Is Rahul Gandhi seen addressing press conferences on the Rafale? He's seen in Uttar Pradesh with his sister Priyanka and Jyotiraditya Scindia. He's not really seen anymore in platforms with the other coalition, with the other Gathbandhan leaders, or with Mamata Banerjee, or with Akhilesh Yadav, or with any of the other opposition parties. So is the Congress increasingly getting isolated on Rafale? Is it getting, is it really marching to its own tune? Because at the end of the day, to convince the people of India that there is actual ghotala on Rafale, there is actual corrupt practice on Rafale, I think, some sort of an institutional signal would have to be there, and that is not there. The Supreme Court has not said anything. The CAG has not said anything. Remember, it was the CAG report of 2010 which sort of brought down the UPA, that 1,76,000 crore figure that was cited about this sort of the notional loss on spectrum allocation. That became the big stick with which the UPA was beaten down. Now, there is no such equivalent. The CAG has not come up with that kind of explosive report on Rafale. That mystical sort of, much touted 1,76,000 crore that the opposition went to town on as far as the UPA was concerned, that is really not there.
Okay.
So, how far is the Congress going to take the Rafale issue? This really has to be answered. I mean, there are many other issues that the opposition needs to raise. The NSSO is an issue. The jobs is an issue. That, I believe, is a really much more urgent issue, and none of the other coalition partners of the Mahagathbandhan are touching Rafale.
Yeah. Okay.
It is only a Congress bugbear. So is Rahul Gandhi exhausting his political capital here? That question has to be asked now in the light of the CAG report, which really has not proved the Congress's point and to some extent has vindicated the government.
Okay. Okay. In fact, with that, we'll take a quick break here on the India development debate and come right back. Do stay with us. Welcome back. You've joined us right here on the India Development Debate, and we're of course continuing to put the spotlight on the CAG report that was tabled in Parliament today on the Rafale deal. And for that, we've of course got with us Sagarika Ghosh, who's a consulting editor of the TOI, Maruf Raza, a strategic affairs expert, spokespersons from the Congress and the BJP, Aishwarya and Hitesh Jain, and of course Abhijit Iyer Mitra. Well, Hitesh, let me ask you, since the money saved by the removal of bank and performance guarantees has supposedly helped Dassault and not the Indian government, should prices have been even lower as the guarantees have been waived off, is a question that's being asked. How would you respond to that?
Well, I'll just give you, as a lawyer, when we go to the court, there are three principles we follow, cardinal. If we are strong on the facts, we bang the facts. If we are strong on the law, we bang the law. And if we are neither strong on the facts nor the law, we bang the desk. So basically, when such kinds of arguments are advanced, this is literally called banging the desk. Because at the end of the day, what is the bottom line? The bottom line is you are saving money. Fine. I mean, if you take into account you will save further money, that is fine. But when you compare the deal of 2007, when you compare the deal of 2016, you clearly see where the advantages lies and why this deal is better in terms of price, escalation. Also, there is one important fact I want to draw your attention and also to the attentions of the viewers. All along the fact, the Congress claimed that they have closed the deal and their deal is a cheaper deal. But today, if you will look at the tweet of Randeep Surjewala, he says that we had a Eurocopter deal of 25% and you should have considered that. If that was the case, why did not they consider the deal of Eurofighter at that time? And what is the interest in Eurofighter? Why is Congress acting as advocates for the Eurofighter, and why they are advocating that they should give the deal to Eurofighter? And can they explain the fact that from 2004 to 2014, if the deal was in the interest of the country and if their whole logic was correct, why did they not close the deal? About this benchmark pricing, I want to also emphasize on that fact, it was 47% lower than L1. Why such lower benchmark pricing? Who are you going to help? And most importantly, this whole HAL argument they are giving, the CAG report clearly say Dassault refused to take the guarantee on the aircraft that will be manufactured by HAL. And even as far the man working hours is concerned, that was a major showstopper. They did not agree with the kind of time that was being taken by HAL, and they felt that this would have led into the cost escalation and it would have really increased the price. So if you look the deal from all the parameters, it is very clear that this deal is an advantage for India, and this deal is the best deal which this government could have negotiated in the best interest of the country.
Aishwarya, you've trained your guns on Anil Ambani claiming that the purpose of this deal was to basically hand out 30,000 crore to him. Now, the total offset clause amounts to, 30,000, and there are other vendors who will also get a substantial share in the pie. And here is where I want to just quote Air Marshal R. Nambiar. He was the Deputy Chief of Air Staff up until November, and he's sort of gone on to detail how offsets for Rafale are divided basically into four parts. And, I won't really get into it, but basically he says that it will be sort of, the 30,000 will be divided amongst these four. Can you really justify the fact that Anil Ambani's Reliance Defence is going to sort of bag this entire pie of offset obligations?
To the same question, the question that we have to ask ourselves is that Mr. Anil Ambani, who had no experience in defense and whose company came into being mere days, weeks before this whole sort of deal came into place, was he really the best equipped to be handling national security, whether it's offset, whether it's parts, whether it's life cycle management, right? And that is the simple question that we ask. Mr. Anil Ambani also, see, a lot of people will say there's no direct evidence, nothing. Even if I concede it's circumstantial, tell me why is it that Mr. Anil Ambani was present in France? Tell me why is it that Mr. Anil Ambani basically had some route of financing for the then French head of state's wife's movie? And why was it that Mr. Anil Ambani recently, as it's come out, has basically spoken to defense officials and has a meeting with officials based on obviously some clearance from the government here? And why is it that Mr. Anil Ambani on his own website puts out that he's been given 30,000 crores of offset, and also that he's going to get a contract for 1 lakh crore in terms of life cycle cost management? And I think a lot of this is extremely suspect, and that is what we're asking. And we are going to train our guns on a man for whom the DPP procedure was retrospectively amended so that anybody without even defense experience could be somebody who had a chance to act in this deal, as well as the fact that they said that Dassault has to pick their offset partner and the circumstances. They said HAL didn't have land, then we find out Dassault has invested in the plant of Anil Ambani and where the Rafale is supposed to go, the production is supposed to happen, or rather it's supposed to be maintained. The simple fact remains that there is far too much coincidence for it to even be that there is far too much happening with Mr. Anil Ambani's company and investments and his meetings and whatnot for it to be mere coincidence, and that is what we're asking of Prime Minister Modi. Why is it Mr. Anil Ambani flew with you? Why is it Mr. Anil Ambani is meeting officials? Why is it he spoke of an MOU? Why is it he opened a defense company mere days before you announced yours? And why is it he's claiming he has this 30,000 crores? All we're saying is he and the Prime Minister need to come out and once and for all just speak of the fact and tell us what it is.
Maruf, the other bit in the CAG is about, the Air Force not defining the air staff qualitative requirements, or the ASQRs, and how they were changed repeatedly during the procurement process, which created difficulties during technical and price evaluation and also affected the integrity of competitive tendering. And then the report goes on to say that it was one of the reasons for the delay. Could you explain to us on what grounds and how did the IF and why did it need to shift these goalposts, and therefore how was competitive bidding affected?
Well, I want to give 3 points. First is the armed forces in India are notorious for shifting the goalpost for GSQR, whether it's ASQR or Navy QR or Army QR, because the fact of the matter is the armed forces are always trained to try and extract the best out of any situation. It's part of their mindset. So the fact is that one of the reasons why we always have a problem in trying to produce something internally, because the internal DPSUs have constantly complained that every time we go back to the armed forces with a prototype, they change the QR. So we have to go back to the design boards. So here again, it was also changed because new equipment, time doesn't wait for India. And new equipment keeps coming up in the market. And when you're striking a deal, you need to strike a deal which will last you for 25, if not 40 years. Do you know all the other aircrafts we have in our inventory? I mean, go back to 40 years or maybe 25 years. The Sukhois came in early 90s. The MiGs came in earlier than that. So the fact is that you need to build in those kind of eventualities when the battlefield scenario will keep changing, and how do you cope with it with what you have in your inventory. So that could be a reason. The second point I wish to make is about the pricing and how the pricing is better or worse. Just go into the net and you will see that countries like Qatar and Egypt that bought 24 Rafales each, they bought it for about 7 billion euros. Whereas we got 36 Rafale with more equipment and more state-of-the-art equipment for 9.7 billion euros, which means we got it cheaper than those countries. The exact number is 274 and 369 million per aircraft or something to that effect. But the fact is we got it cheaper. The third thing is that we keep complaining that why are we not looking at the maintenance costs? Please understand that the maintenance costs are built in the pricing of the Rafale and anything else we buy. In this case, the maintenance cost has been built in over the next 5 years. So maybe after that, the figures will throw up as to how much we need to spend on maintenance. And even to start with, Rafale is offering you operational capability of aircrafts fully ready for war in the range of 60 to 70% aircrafts all the time ready. The Sukhois, which is the best we have in our fleet, are never been more than 50% operationally ready. So we have to understand the scenario we are in. We don't have friends in our neighborhood. We have China and Pakistan which have ganged up together. We need to put up a reasonable front.
Okay.
And finally, you know, we keep coming back to this whole aspect about why the procedures were bypassed. Look at the defense procurement process. I don't think the procedures were bypassed. I'm quoting again DPP 2013, para 60, para 71, very clearly say it's country to country. We are ready to believe Mr. Hollande, who is now a rival of Mr. Macron, because he made some utterances because his partner didn't get a deal from Anil Ambani. And sure, Anil Ambani, being a businessman that he is, must be pushing the card everywhere to try and get business.
Okay.
But, you know, 30% of the deal has to go into offset, which is 18,000 crore. And
Right.
the CEO of Rafale has said 850 crores is the maximum that Anil Ambani is going to get. So where do they get this figure of 30,000 crores?
Right.
When the total
Abhijit-
deal is 59,000 crores.
Right, Maruf, I
my
have time
maths
for
is
two
bad,
last
but it's not-
questions. So, sorry, Maruf, I just have time for two last questions. Abhijit, you know, when it comes to faster delivery, the CAG hasn't given the government very much credit for shaving off just 1 month in the delivery time for the jets that were brought for urgent requirements, something which, you know, the Congress party has also pointed out. Is the government somewhere guilty of saying that they enhanced this delivery of fighter jets?
Well, look, I mean, the production line is set, right? There's only so much you can do. So even advancing it by 2 to 3 months isn't particularly bad. That said, if you remember the dissent note, which was published, the 8-page dissent note, it said that deliveries couldn't be made for 10 years and therefore it should be given to Rafale. Now, clearly, it's not been 10 years. The delivery started within 2 years of the contract being signed. And in 2022, when all the 36 planes are delivered, then all the India Specific Enhancement, the upgrades will start off again. So it's a very good time frame that's been condensed too. Is it compromises here and there? Yes, of course. But I want to come to something else that got raised here, which is why wasn't the Eurofighter offer considered when they offered it to us for 20 to 25% cheaper? Well, the point is they can't. That would have been a blatant process violation. You read either the 2013 DPP or the 2016 DPP, even though this was concluded under the 2013 DPP, there is no provision there for a renewed price to be introduced. Now, should that provision be given? Yes and no. Yes, because it gives you much more room for maneuver. No, because they can keep giving you false prices every now and then just to undercut the opposition, and then you start up with negotiations all over again. So imagine if it accepted. Remember, this process started sometime in 2005 and it concluded in 2012. Now, if the direct negotiations with Rafale alone took 5 years, almost, well, 3 years to fructify, you then cancel it midway through, go in for a rival negotiation with Eurofighter, that would have added another 5 years before you came to the conclusion that, well, you know, Eurofighter was also lying and they couldn't deliver the fighter at those prices. Look, there's no easy answers here. The problem is that, you know, a negotiation is always a give and take. You win some, you lose some. Just because you lose some doesn't mean it's a scam, and just because you win some, it isn't exactly a huge victory either. The fact remains today that, you know, the government just did what it could best under the circumstances. And what were the circumstances here? It's very easy for us to now look back with the benefit of hindsight and say, oh, well, you know, like the point you were bringing up, those $500 million that were lost in the negotiation, well, not lost in the negotiation, but could have been extorted out of the French much better. You know, it's very easy to say now with the benefit of hindsight, but this is like a game of poker. When you read the poker results at the end of the day in the newspaper the next day, it all seems oh so logical. He should have done this, he should have done that. But when you're actually playing poker, you don't know what the end result is going to be. That's the whole fun of poker, or, well, the frustration of poker, if you want to call it that. And that, unfortunately, is what's happening out here. There's a lot of retrospective wisdom going around which wasn't offered during the negotiation process. And, you know, in spite of that, I think we played a very, very good hand. Irrespective of which government it was, we did fine.
Right. Sagarika, I'm going to let you have the last word. Politics apart, you know, the CAG report somewhere today is also a scathing indictment of the procurement process that exists in the Indian defense, isn't it? Long, winding and rather opaque.
Absolutely, Tanya. I think what the CAG report has shown us is the manner in which defense procurement in India is in need of a huge overhaul, how it is subject to all these delays and red tape and procedures and the kind of sort of delays that there are in the process. I think basically this is obviously opening it up to different interpretations. Was there corruption? Was there scam? Was there collusion? Was there crony capitalism? Remember, very senior people in the government have actually gone on record in the notes that have been published in the Hindu and the Indian Express saying that procedures were bypassed by the government, that the Prime Minister's office was unilaterally negotiating, that in fact there were certain bureaucratic processes that were overlooked, governmental processes were overlooked, the cabinet processes were overlooked. So, you know, there are all kinds of issues about this deal clearly. Why is it that in the end we ended up with only 36 aircraft and not the full amount? So I think questions will be asked. But I think politically, Tanya, I think this is now a little bit of a spent bullet, precisely because the CAG report of 2019 is not the CAG report of 2010. This is not Mr. Vinod Rai saying there's a notional loss of 1,76,000 crore. If there was a notional loss by not giving it to Eurofighter and by taking it from Dassault, then yes, perhaps the Congress party could have gone to town and said, you know, this is our notional loss. But alas, for the Congress party, there is no Mr. Vinod Rai here, and this is known. There is no 1,76,000 crore. So I think what is very clear is that it is impossible to nail a massive scam on the government in this particular CAG report. It is to some extent advantage government, and you know, perhaps there are issues with defense procurement, perhaps there are issues with the way the deal was done, perhaps there are issues of crony capitalism, perhaps there are issues of Ministry of Defense officials being overlooked, perhaps there are issues of procedures being overlooked and correct cabinet procedures not being followed. But is all of this a scam? And can all of this be sold to the Indian people as a scam and as a gigantic example of official corruption and the Prime Minister's own corruption? I'm not sure that connection really holds. I think this is now something that Rahul Gandhi is spending far too much.
Right. All right, Sagarika, with that, I'm afraid we've completely run out of time. So I'm so sorry to have to cut you off. But Hitesh Jain, Aishwarya Mahadev, Maruf Raza, Sagarika Ghosh and Abhijit Iyer Mitra, thank you so much for taking the time out and joining us here on the India Development Debate.